call the May meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board to order. Welcome, everybody. First order of business is the minutes. Did folks have a chance to review those? Any additions or corrections?
No.
I was gonna ask, does it need to signify that I wasn't in person, but I was here via Zoom for this meeting? I thought in previous minutes we kind of designated on Zoom or whatever.
We can add
Is
that.
that not?
Yeah.
Is that not necessary?
Oh,
I think that's probably a good precedent.
yeah,
So we can add via Zoom.
okay, all right.
I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe I saw that in a couple of other minutes where, like, you were there via Zoom.
Right,
Right.
Okay.
okay,
Yeah, good point.
okay. Any other additions or corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Do your second?
Does he have to say with changes or with?
With change.
Okay.
I'll say after my name that it says that I attended via Zoom.
Okay, yeah, all right, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Now we're to the public comment section of the meeting. And the board is committed to hearing from the public, and we are pleased that you've taken the time to speak to us today. We ask that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. While we will not directly respond to public comments or engage in dialogue with speakers, we seriously consider input from the public. Public comments at meetings is one important way the board receives feedback, and it enables us to do our job of formulating policies to govern the district. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. So the first up is Sarah Thompson from Bend, Oregon.
You usually have us start with our name.
Sure, your name and where you're from.
My name is Sarah Thompson. I've lived in Bend for 10 years, and I'll be reading a letter from the library staff. To the members of the Deschutes Public Library Board. In April 2022, more than 20 library staff members made a plea to library board members Ray Meow and Ann Ness to partner with library staff in support of a bond measure that passed by the vote of the people in November 2020. Now, more than a year later, we are disappointed to see that board member Ray Meow has not only ignored our plea, but that he has continued his efforts to put up roadblocks in regard to the library bond projects. Libraries are a cornerstone of democracy, and to continue to watch board member Meow actively work against what the public voted for is antithetical to all that we hold dear as civil servants. The library board voted 5-0 to put the bond measure on the ballot and to let the people decide. Ray Meow was one of the board members who voted to put that measure on the ballot. We are asking that Mr. Meow support what he voted to put on the ballot and to respect what a majority of voters then voted for. As the Source Weekly recently stated, quote, "We are guessing that if Meow wins this election by 50.0001%, he'll find himself respecting the will of the majority and persisting in his position on the library board. Similarly, he and other community members who are continuing to pursue a misguided and unfounded mission of changing the scope of the bond should respect democracy, humble themselves, and move forward implementing what the people voted for in 2020. End quote. It is disheartening and frustrating to witness Ray Meow continually put his personal agenda above the democratic vote of the people and above the very people he is supposed to serve. We live in a time when book banning and challenges to intellectual freedom are rampant. In fact, they are on our doorstep. We need library board members who are going to focus on the important work of ensuring the public has free and open access to information, not board members who are distracted by their own personal desires. Our work serving the public provides a refuge and hope for us during these times. To have this strife and struggle brought into our work culture through your actions is demoralizing. We ask again that you accept the vote of the people in a free and fair election and move forward as a library ally. We are eager to continue doing this important work of serving the public without feeling forever at odds with one of the very people who is supposed to help us do that work. Our previous letter had 23 signatures. This one has 56. And we are very excited to vote this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Heather McNeil.
Hello, this brings back fond memories. My name is Heather McNeil. I live in Bend, have been here 24 years. And for those of you who don't know me or don't recognize me because of the white hair, I was the youth services manager at Deschutes Public Library for 20 years. I retired in September of 2019. And I think retirement is wonderful. Before I left, we had begun meeting with the public and with architects to begin the dreaming and the planning for the future of the libraries. I remember talking with library users and non-users at the Deschutes County Fair and in parks and on sidewalks. I remember staff, public, the board, and architects gathering at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon Gathering Hall to talk about what is needed and what was possible. And I remember many, many managers' meetings to discuss the research based on the successes of other library systems. I'm sure those meetings went on long after I was gone. The reason I bring this up is because I know the ideas and plans for the Stevens Ranch Library are the result of years of careful consideration, as well as consultation with architectural, legal, and financial experts. Stevens Ranch Library is the result of thousands of people expressing what they wanted in the New Bend Library, as well as what they wanted in Redmond. It is the result of hours and hours of staff time fine-tuning, revamping, and responding. It is the result of Todd's and his staff's meticulous attention to detail, to the future of libraries, and to fiscal responsibility. I think it is a great disservice to the dedication and expertise of this library staff and to the voters of Deschutes County for board members to try and change the direction based on one person's reluctance to accept that vote. I attended the recent public session at the Larkspur Fitness Center in which the architects revealed the plans for what I have no doubt will become a flagship building for Deschutes County. It was clear that careful consideration had been given to energy saving and transportation, as well as to the amazing and creative Children's Discovery Center. Yay. The building design is glorious with plenty of space, light, flexibility, and the outside look of book pages. I can hardly wait to walk through the doors. I am puzzled by members of the public who complain about not being able to bike there or it being too far from them or wanting smaller libraries here and there. If it's too far or not an easy bike ride, they can still go to the library that they've been visiting. There will be thousands of people who will be delighted to welcome the Stevens Ranch Library as their community library. And the problem with wanting more libraries is that more libraries mean more staff and more maintenance and more electricity and more water and more books and more, none of which the bond would pay for. I regret that this board election has become a political contest of he said, she said, with misinformation being repeated and personal wants ignoring what was already decided. I believe the Stevens Ranch Library will be exactly what Deschutes County needs. A library that provides the services and possibilities Todd, his staff, and the architects know are needed for the future.
Thank you, Heather. Next up is Liz Goodrich.
Thank you for taking public comment. I know how important it is, and I know also how sometimes it's hard to hear. I'm not here to talk about the continual spread of misinformation about what can be done or not done with bond funds. I'm not here to discuss how disappointing it was to see a library board member attend a forum sponsored by a group who advocates for banning of books or removal of books from shelves. I am here to talk about my personal experience of being employed by this district during these tumultuous times. I've worked here for 20 years. It's been a joy and a privilege. I love my work, but I can tell you that in the last 2 years, I have loved it less. And that's because I spend a significant amount of my time interfacing with the public, trying to explain exactly what's happening within our district. It's confusing to the public. It's confusing to the staff. And frankly, I think the library's reputation has been tarnished. And that is absolutely something that I cannot stand for, having it been a place where I've committed my work life to. I ask that this board move these projects forward. Let's get this done. The people of Deschutes County deserve it. And I also have been thinking recently about the people who stand to lose if we do not get this done. And the constituents that stand to lose the most are the people who live in Bend. Projects in Redmond, the remodeling projects in the other branches, they are on their way. You do Red List bond project now, library users in Bend are going to lose. And there can be a lot of very unhappy people. So I urge you to move this forward with urgency and purpose. And let's get back to the business of serving Deschutes County residents.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any other members of the public who would like to address the board? Thank you very much, all of you, for your comments, and we'll close the public comment section of the meeting and proceed to our bond update report. We appreciate you coming. Greg?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. So this past month, not a lot of change on the level, but I run through the meeting report that I sent out, talk about any of the things I see happening and what's coming up and where we're at. On our schedule, there was a few things that I wrote about in here, and one of the things that we're dealing with right now is our switchgear. And the switchgear is an electrical component and it runs the building. It's the main kind of heart or brain of our electrical system. And this happened on Sisters and Lapine, as well as on Redmond. Right now, what we're seeing in the industry, really very broadly, we've had issues on probably more than half a dozen, close to 10 projects. There's only about 5 manufacturers that are primary here in the country that build and supply these components. And right now they're really struggling with the lead times of getting them built, delivered, and supplied to projects throughout. And so we've seen that come up on our projects now. At Sisters and Lapine, we have a firm date from the manufacturer when it'll be delivered to the site, because we are replacing those to upgrade them to current models there. We've developed a plan and a strategy of how we're going to manage through that in order to keep the work going on and minimize that disruption. We hadn't really worked through it when I sent out the report, so I didn't change the schedule dates in the report. And I did put in there that I thought it would be like a 5 to 6 week impact, and it is looking like it'll be that, and that the opening dates for Sisters and Lapine will be both in the month of September. We were in August before, and so those are moving there. Sun River will be affected because we're not going to start Sun River until after we get Lapine reopened, and so we work through that sequencing and that schedule. You'll see that come up in the next month's report. I'll post those. I'm getting ready to issue a updated master development schedule update this month here in May. And so then that'll reflect in next month's report. So those, I think we have well under control. There is some impact. We talked with SunWest, our general contractor, CMGC, on the project. And to mitigate any cost impacts, to keep it within our established GMP with them. And so we're working through that right now. We have our own owner's contingency as well for those projects, should there be some additional costs. So it won't have it'll be utilization of those contingencies, but not necessarily an overall impact to the project budget per se. On Redmond, we're not scheduled to finish that till next summer. But it has it's a much bigger switchgear, and it has a significant time impact also. There, Kirby Nagelhout is our CMGC, and they've been working with their electrical subcontractor and supplier to look at options of what can we do. They're looking at options of changing to a different manufacturer who has a better time frame to deliver the switchgear. And so we're looking at that right now. That hasn't been finalized. We've given them direction to move forward with that kind of an action. They're finalizing the details, and we'll work through that with them this month. And ideally, by the end of the month, we'll know, hey, what are the steps we're taking to mitigate it? What's the net impact, if any, to the schedule completion of Redmond? From a schedule standpoint, overall, those are the big issues that we're dealing with to date. Progress on Sisters and Lapine is really good, very positive. Outside of that one piece, they can continue to complete everything because they were existing buildings with existing switchgear in them. We're able to maintain it in its current working capacity to let us finish all the work. And then we'll do a switch out of the equipment when it arrives. And the team has had conversations with the county about that, of our process, what we need to do, working with our building inspectors to make sure that they're comfortable of the steps that we'll take. And our design team was also engaged in that discussion. So that's moving right along. Redmond construction is moving right along. I don't know if you got a chance to see the videos and stuff in there. They've been going vertical construction, building the stair towers, and you drive by, you'll see a lot more going out there. They're very active, a lot of work going on, good momentum, good production is going. One of the things we talked about a year ago was the ordering and the production of our DLT and our glulam timber structure, and that's all in fabrication right now with fabricators and scheduled to be coming out. This next month in June, we're going to start to see all of the slab on grade complete, because all the underground foundations are going in, underground plumbing and that. And then we'll start seeing the building frame going up. So very exciting. Things are moving along real well there. The Stevens Ranch progressing for the schedule, moving right along. So there's really not a lot, it's marching through the design development phase, and no issues there at this point in time. We're working through. We've already started the discussions about strategies around switchgear and how we'll go about buying it, and ideally how we buy it early. And that's one of those advantages we have with the CMGC approach, is that we can engage early on with our contractor to go out and do some pre-purchasing, just like we did with the DLT. We're going to approach our switchgear similarly, and that way we try and forecast and address those kinds of impacts as we go along. So from a schedule standpoint, you'll see that update. No activity, of course, right now on East Bend, as we talked about, or downtown Bend. From a budget standpoint, there were no budget adjustments, no changes to the budget, as you noticed there. I did point out one typo I had in my report last month. Didn't change the financial budget, but it was in the written summary. I had an incorrect number in there. So that was on page 2 under program funding sources. But like I said, there's no real changes to the budget at this point. We continue to evaluate that and really look at that. As we are continuing to move forward this month, we're doing a number of pricings on some FF&E components for Sun River and Redmond. And then in the month of June, we'll be doing another major budget update based on the design development documents for Stevens Ranch. And really going through and want to do another budget check up. That'll come out, I'll probably finish it in July and then publish it at the end of that month. We'll spend most of the month of June having the cost estimates done by Kirby, as well as our cost estimator, JFE. And we're also doing a full update again on our FF&E package. And that way, really double check our numbers. That's the whole process of check them frequently to make sure that design is continuing in alignment with our budget and what's going on in the market, what's happening, so that we can address any of those issues. So you'll see that, but probably we'll talk mostly about it in at the August work, because I'll finish it up in July. But that's kind of what's coming up in the next few months around the budget. Contingency remained as in previously reported last month. There was no change to that level either. Not a lot of activity on the procurements and contracts, after our last board meeting, got those all finalized and those have been processed and done. So kind of slow activity this month. We'll see more. So coming up in June, so Sun West is right now working on putting together the GMP for Sun River. And so that will be going through that at the end of this month, and we'll bring that to the board in June for everybody to discuss approval of their GMP for that. And we talked a lot with Sun West about this, is that we wanted to get that GMP set, allow them to go out and procure subcontracts and start buying materials. We have another switch gear there that we need to buy. And we also have a fair amount of mechanical equipment upgrades at Sun River. And so we want to buy that equipment as well, because they're another one that has long lead times. And it's really to kind of set us up so that when we start Sun River in October, that we're really set and ready to go. And so we want to take advantage of this time frame. They're really looking at what are the lessons learned from Sisters and Lapine about the plans, working closely with Steele Architects and Miller Hall Architects about any of the things they find, questions they have, and trying to address them right now so that we really get the most complete bidding activity with our subcontractors, which will give us a really sound GMP for Sun River. So that'll be coming up. On Sun River and on Redmond, we're out pricing right now the shelving systems for both of those facilities, and anticipate that those two will come to you guys in June as well. And that's with Space Saver Specialists. So we're putting those two together. On Sun River, we're also starting the pricing of our furniture systems there. So that will all be coming in. I think the last big piece that will be in the works is Redmond's furniture, and that's actually a few months out. We have a little bit more time on that and some more. We've been going through presentations and picking colors and fabrics and what's discontinued and what's not in the furniture world. So that's all going on in the procurement aspects of the project. Nothing really new on insurance. No claims, no issues. Everybody's getting enrolled and that's being maintained. So no issues to talk about. On Stevens Ranch, the site plan application and documents, those were completed and submitted as planned. So they're into city. Design is continuing with design development. It completes the end of this month, which is a major phase of project design. And so this will be where we, again, really are double checking our budget, our schedule, but also preparing to start construction documents. And that's our final phase in really the design aspects of this building and getting it really complete and ready to go. So it's a busy month for our design team. Month of June, as I said, we'll be doing budgeting. We'll also be doing design reviews with the team, with DPL to really go through. There'll be a presentation to the board in June. Miller Hole will be here in person to meet with you and share the design of where we're at. They're doing presentation with staff in the month of June, so that staff also gets to see it and set up a what they call a mural board, and it's where staff gets to write their comments and questions and give them feedback to both DPL management as well as our design team before we launch into the CD. So a lot of good activity happening there. You know, the things like furniture, signage, all of our early learning components with plus and greater than, those are all coming right together with the building designs that we really have a complete design as we look at it before we launch into CDs. You know, with our early learning components of all of the projects, back with like Sisters in Lapine, they're the first ones out there, call them the guinea pig, first ones that we're doing. We're going to be seeing some prototypes here in the next couple of weeks from our fabricator. They're building those things so we can see them, go over and touch them and make sure that, hey, this is what we're expecting and how they're going to work and function, which is really just exciting news to have, you know, where that whole component is coming to life in real life things that touchy feely and know how it's going to go in and see it. So all of that component is really culminating here with Stevens Ranch. On Redmond, the only design elements left are the early learning, and those are wrapping up. I see, like the furniture is wrapping up, and so those will be ample time between now and when we open next summer to finalize designs, get them out there, final priced, and go into fabrication and delivery. So very comfortable with how we're going there on the design standpoint. Sisters in Lapine, really no design issues. And Sun River, building plan check is proceeding still. County got backlogged a bit here in the last month or so. So we're just now starting to receive our plan checks on comments on that. Because we don't start till late October, don't see any issues with still securing our permits well in advance of that. So very comfortable. Same with our temporary trailer facility for Sun River, where we're moving the Sisters over to Sun River. Had conversations with the county already of what our plan is and what we want to do. They've already said, yep, they're okay with that. Submit your documents and they'll process them and do the detailed plan check. But concept wise, they're very comfortable with that. So I think our planning around how we're going to manage Sun River construction, temporary facilities is all locked in, and we're just processing paperwork to secure those permits. So I think I did note, you know, from our discussion last month, we went out and did a walkthrough at East Bend to look at, hey, what are some of the things that could be done? What are options? And that's in process. And that'll, as we put that together, come back to you guys for your consideration of what we want to do to what extent there. So it's just ongoing at this point. And again, nothing going on downtown Bend. It really does follow Stevens Ranch because of how that flow will ultimately work in construction as well as in operations. You know, when we move staff over, the draws were processed. That's all going well. Hopefully the photos I attached and the links to the drone footage was all functioning and you were able to open it up and see it. Questions on anything?
I do have something.
Yeah.
So can you explain, so you said, I think I understood this right. the use of the contingency funds for the potential of the delays because of the switch here, so what would that look, how would you be using the contingency funds for that?
It would be if there is, so when there's a delay in time, there's the added cost of supervision and staffing that's there longer. There's gonna be some costs on Sisters and Lapine to remove and replace the switchgear out of order. When it would have been done up front, we're gonna tell, we told them, look, keep it operational and energized so it has power so that we can turn on lights, start HVAC. Then we'll actually do a shutdown. So the electrician they're going to have additional work to do there. Some of that SunWest may be able to absorb within their GMP. They're looking at trying to absorb that cost. They're looking at ways to, how do they manage their general conditions, their staffing, and they're a very good partner. We have very open conversations about how to do it. It's an open book concept with the CMGC method. So, they really embrace that. And their goal is, hey, let's get DPL open, let's manage to our budget we have. And so that's our goal, is to actually not hit the owner's contingency, but we have the owner's contingency there if it's needed. And, this is an issue where what's happening in the industry is really, I wouldn't say unprecedented, because we've seen impacts like this happening to a lot of materials over the last, since the start of the pandemic. And we're still seeing certain ripple effects of that, where manufacturers don't have the capacity, they're struggling to get materials, the raw materials that come in to put them together. There's still some of that. I had one, not on our DPL projects, but on another project where we have the same issue. And they named off everything imaginable as what was happening, from the war in Ukraine to the pandemic to the global shipping issues. And it's hard to say why, but that's one of them. And so that's an excusable delay under the contract that does allow the contractor to request time and funding that we evaluate. So kind of long-winded answer, but
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
On Stevens Ranch, can you give me some numbers as to how much has been spent on Stevens Ranch today? And then what's the projection of how much will be spent by the end of 2020?
yeah, so to date, and this is as of the end of March, it was just under 7.5 million to date on Stevens Ranch.
Okay.
A large portion of that is in soft costs, which is design and permits, fees, consultant costs, which is the majority of that. It's about 6 million. That project is at this point probably spending on the order of magnitude of about $500,000 a month as we go forward. Over the next kind of short term, 3 to 4 months period. It will pick up a little bit more as we start into purchasing of our general contract and our subcontracts. So much like we did with Redmond, where we bought the DLT early, we're going to be doing that again. And that was, a commitment of it on Redmond of over $1 million. It'll be a much larger commitment on Stevens Ranch, and we'll pay some deposits, not the full amount. I think there'll be a few other trades that will do that. That's more likely to be late summer, early fall. Those will start to come into play. I would say that one really large component is the closing of the land, which happens at the end of the year, into November. And at that point, we'll actually pay the balance of the land purchase. And so that would be a very sizable payment at that time, you know. The total price was just over 10 million. We paid 700,000 in deposits, so it'd be the balance. So that happens near the end of the year. So it kind of has an upward trajectory. And then in 24, when we commence construction, then we'll really see it ramp way up with construction costs.
And so projection by the end of the year, we would have spent on Stevens Ranch.
I think with the purchase of the land and where we're going on general construction costs, we're probably in the about 13 to 15 million. And I actually have it in my cash flow, that cash flows out. I just don't have it open.
Okay. And, groundbreaking is February still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll probably be late February. We've been talking with Kirby about, hey, what's gonna be the right time?
Okay.
We really look at when do we get our structural permit, which starts building the building, and how much time we need to do our earthwork or grading or site preparation in advance, which, and how's the weather looking? So, you know, we can kind of balance that in that February, March timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Greg?
Right, well, the switch gear is not considered a change order.
The gear itself is not a change order. The delay is considered a force majeure claim
Okay,
because it's beyond the contractor's control. And we evaluate that to say, okay, is this something that you could have done to prevent it? Because, you know, we want to make sure, hey, it's not the contractor's responsibility. You know, I think that both of our contractors are responding very rapidly to this issue.
Mhm.
And looking to find ways to help mitigate it.
how much do you think the total cost would be for that?
On Sisters and Lapine, I think that those are in the 25,000 to up to $50,000 range because of general conditions, costs and stuff.
For each one?
Yeah.
Okay.
On Redmond, I think that it's going to be probably a little bit larger exposure, right? Some of these we may be able to mitigate down, but I think its exposure could be much more on the 100,000 range. There, we're looking at actually changing the manufacturer to someone else who has a much better delivery time,
That's a change order.
but an added cost.
Yeah,
And then it's a matter of, even with the better delivery time, how does that work with our schedule to get to an opening, and does it affect our overall duration relative to the general contractor's schedule and time? And so, you know, that Redmond has, because it's a bigger project, bigger team, it has a larger risk associated to the amount.
yeah, overall cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something, you know, my goal is to have that ideally finalized here in May and into June. And if there's costs, be able to recognize them, and then you'll see that come out in the updated budget as well.
Mhm.
Track of what's going on with that.
Good, good, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Greg? Okay, thank you
Good
very
seeing
much,
you.
Greg.
Yep.
All right, next up is third quarter financials. Robert.
Robert, do you want me to bring those? Or you? Does any board member need it brought up? I included the report in the packet, so. Yeah.
Would you mind moving your mask?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I just.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm pleased to present to you the third quarter financials for the current fiscal year. This is a really good snapshot and lead in for the budget proposal for the next fiscal year, because we can see areas where we're tracking against what we had estimated or built into the budget for the current fiscal year and see how well things are going with a decent amount of confidence, given that there's only 3 months left in the fiscal year where things are tracking well. So as always, we start off with the cash reconciliation report to look at the overall, essentially the balance of the cash and the modified accrued elements of our fund balances. So we're looking at commercial checking, which is the First Interstate Bank account where we manage most of our transactions for the various uses of our funds. The merchant account, which is essentially just an intake account. It's where any book recovery fees or other incidentals, printing fees and things deposit to that. And we typically kind of move that over as we go. Petty cash, which remains roughly stable, although we did see some movement there in the last quarter because we closed down a few of our branches and moved the petty cash out of those branches until we were ready to reopen them. So there was a little bit of movement around there. Government investment pool is the LGIP accounts that we talked about. So that consists of the money that is in the general fund LGIP, the money that we reserve for operating expenditures, basically. And that's the deposit account for any of our tax receipts from the tax measure for the assessment for the district. The other two LGIP accounts are on that lines F and G. Line F is kind of our liquid account of cash available for immediate expenditures on the bond projects. And line G is the money that we collect as part of what the bond measure that was passed for servicing the debt. And then finally, just going back up to US Bank, the safekeeping account is the remaining amount of money that was collected from the bond issue. And we hold that in a series of investments. So we can cash out any of those investments, but we do kind of try and hold that to be much more stable and then just reinvest as we go until we need more liquid cash into the LGIP. And we manage that based on Greg's budget and cash flow analysis, as well as the general analysis from our investment brokers at I am blanking at our investment brokers.
Piper Sandler.
Piper Sandler, thank you. And then in terms of the other elements on this balance sheet, so in general, those remain fairly stable or fluctuate based on monthly needs. So we end up with a modified accrual fund balance of $236,925,015. And that is apportioned based on the 5 funds that we maintain: our general operating fund, our reserve fund, our grant fund, or our collection of grant funds, our bond capital fund, and then the debt servicing fund. And you'll see all of this very shortly in the budget review. So moving into the highlights, we can look at each of those funds and see where we're at 75% of the year into this fiscal year. So in terms of the general fund and tax receipts, we are tracking above the 100% mark of what was estimated in the budget. And there's a couple reasons for that. So our budget resources for general fund come from 4 main sources. There are a few other smaller sources, but the big ones are the tax receipts, the MOUs and other types of agreements that we have with other organizations for services rendered, interest on the cash deposit in that LGIP account, and then finally, what we ended with our prior year's balance. So the prior year's balance was a bit higher than what was estimated in last year's budget, because there always is a certain amount of just educated guesswork of where do we think that number is going to be based on where we're at 3 months out when we put the budget together. So we were resourced more highly than expected on the carryover from the prior year. We also, the county's doing an excellent job this year. They've had a good year for tax collection. So typically we run at about a 97% collection rate. And this year we hit 97% collection on current year taxes in Q3. So we're expecting the county to land just a little bit higher than that in the last few tax assessments of the fiscal year. And then finally, this year has been just a high interest rate year, which we didn't really know how to anticipate in last year's budget. So we budgeted our interest received at much lower than where we actually ended up this year. The interest rates on all of these funds from the LGIP account and from the investments have been much higher than expected, which is great news for the district. In terms of expenses, so if everything we're spending at just a straight line across the fiscal year, we spent, exactly the same amount every single day in the fiscal year, we'd expect the budget to land around 75%. So it's a good benchmark, but it's not necessarily something you have to hold to religiously. And it's the benchmark that I use to just take a second look at each of these line items and make sure that they all make sense. Are we spending the way that we think we will? Because there are some line items that do end up as a kind of a straight line expenditure. So you ask yourself, okay, what are the ones that are running slightly higher than 75% at this point of the year? What are the ones running less than 75%? For personal and services and benefits and salaries, that's running at 70% right now, which is really right where we want to see it. It's not right on the number where then, you really do want to just monitor that very closely against what's been appropriated by the board and the budget committee. It's running just under it, but really closely to what we expected for the year in terms of salaries, in terms of benefits and other related expenses for personal services. Materials and services is running at 63% relative to that 75% benchmark. We do start to look at, okay, so what's running low, what's running high, does it all make sense? There were only two areas that ran above 75%, and they both make sense. In fact, I think in both cases I reported on this the last 2 quarters as well. The first one is audit expenses. Those do tend to post in the first half of the year, given that this year's audit season seems to go a little bit longer than it typically does because of the complexity of what the auditor was investigating and some new regulations that came from the General Audit Standards Board. The audit just took a bit longer. There was a little bit more scope than we anticipated. And so we actually did see some invoices roll in Q3 as well for those December audit work that was performed. The other one is rent, and rent always runs a bit higher. Rent is one you would expect to run as a straight line expenditure. You know exactly what you're spending every month, except we always pay just a little bit in advance of the new month. So it always includes that extra month up until the end of the fiscal year. At the end of the fiscal year, we'll pay the July rent in June, but then because of the way we do our accrued accounting, we actually book that in the next fiscal year. So at the end of the fiscal year, it'll look at 100% on your rent. It's just each quarter when we look at it, we've got that extra month of prepay on the next month and the new quarter kind of hanging in there. All of the rest of the accounts in the general fund ran either right where we want them to be or below. And taking a look at a few of them as to why they ran below. Well, education and travel, it was less than was anticipated in the budget. However, the budget for this current fiscal year included expenses related to the OLA conference, which happened this quarter. And so we would expect, and this is what we saw, underspending on education and travel through the third quarter because those invoices for OLA didn't really post until April when the conference occurred. Same thing with memberships, because there is always a certain amount that you bake in terms of like, are there going to be new staff memberships when people register for the conference and they roll the memberships in? Election expense, that's one that obviously that's underrunning because the expenditures all kind of post closer to the election, which is going to be a Q4 expense. And then the other ones really just vary based on needs, like things like non-employee labor. We always carry a small amount in our budget because you never know what unanticipated non-employee labor or temp labor you're going to need at the start of the budget year. But it turned out we didn't need that. So that shows as an underspend. Same thing with printing. You plan for a certain amount of printing, but general trends, we are kind of seeing reduced printing relative to pre-pandemic. Some of that is coming back though. We've relaunched several of our print publications, and so we may see something different in the new fiscal year. Meeting support, postage, recruitment supplies, these are all things that fluctuate based on what we need, given the time. And so it's good that we budget and appropriate a certain amount that gives us that freedom to move when we need to, but we don't necessarily have to use it. And they all kind of run at smaller amounts relative to the overall budget. Volunteer and staff recognition, that does vary with annual needs, but we do have a few staff and volunteer events that will be showing up in Q4. So we'll see that number jump up Q3 relative to Q4. And then in terms of capital purchases and contingency, so 33% of that budget was expended, but there's a few reasons for that. We budgeted the purchase of a facilities truck, and we did purchase that. We budgeted for a certain amount of IT capital outlay, but like many of these other things, a lot of that fluctuates based on needs. So we build in a certain amount based on what we think we may need for the equipment purchases. Then we've got a great team and they make things work and repair and stretch the life out of things, or you know, there's just different usage needs and than what we ended up budgeting. So we're going to expect that capital outlay probably to run about half of what was budgeted, but overall that's a good thing. We set it aside, but we didn't actually end up needing that for the capital purchases as much as we anticipated. Okay, looking at the other fund, it's a much more straightforward kind of report. So if we look at the reserve fund, again, running slightly higher, but mainly that's due to higher than anticipated interest revenue on the LVIP account. So that reserve fund ran at a 101% resourcing, and it's running quite, you know, pretty stable through the year. It's basically just kind of moving up and down based on how much more interest gets accrued there. In terms of what we've used for expenditures in that reserve fund, there are two main expenditures. One was the approved transfer of Roble Lane property out of the capital projects fund and into this reserve fund, with the decision to move away from Roble Lane as a site for the overall bond project. So that was really just that bookkeeping move, but it shows up as an expenditure on reserve. And then the mobile library project, which you will see in the budget proposal as well. We put it into this year's budget, knowing that supply chain and lead times on vehicle purchases, it has just extended dramatically in the last few years. We saw that with the facilities truck purchase last year, and we're seeing it here now. So we placed orders for 3 different vehicles under that project in the reserve fund. One has arrived, and so that's where we've seen the expenditure, but the other 2 have yet to really get here, and so they'll probably carry over into next year's budget, and we'll expense that next year as well. Grant funds, looking great there in terms of resourcing. We're resourced at 99% of what we anticipated, and grant fund resourcing really is a certain amount of again, just educated analysis of where you think something's going to land in terms of how much is the state going to give us for ready to read, and how much do we anticipate will be coming through foundation? How much do we think will be coming from outside funds? So that's just like hitting the hole in one with a blindfold right here. 99% resourced at 3/4 of the way into the year on the grant funds. Those grant resources do include an unanticipated $5,000 grant received from OHSU for the National Institutes of Health walking study that the board was briefed on a couple of months ago. In terms of expenses, we've spent about 41%. The majority of that's coming from ready to read expenditures and a novel idea. Although I'll say again, a novel idea, an awful lot of the culminating event expenditures really don't show up in this report. They're going to be part of the Q4 expense. So well resourced, but tracking well to expenses there. Then we go into the bond project and the debt service. So for the capital projects fund, resourced at 103%, again, higher than anticipated interest. And in this case, the larger cash holding and then the investments and those bonds performing on reinvestment even more highly than I expected are the result of those resources being higher than anticipated. And then in terms of expenditures, it's running at 25%. I will say that's running significantly lower than was budgeted, because the budget at the time that we developed it for FY 22-23, was not yet clear what the path forward was with Robo Lane kind of not being a viable path moving forward. And so there was a certain amount of building in the margin to give us the freedom to make those moves. And so right now we're running at an expenditure of about 25%. We'll probably land at anywhere between 30 and 35% of the budget expended in the current fiscal year for this project. Finally, debt service. So it's running exactly on track. This one's a very simple fund. It's really collecting the money through the bond assessment and then budgeting that out for 3 payments. We make an interest payment in December, and then we make an interest and a principal payment in June. And so in those cases, we're 33% of the way through on the expenditures, because we haven't paid two out of the 3 payments. Those happen in June.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions for Robert?
Very clearly stated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
The US bank. Account,
Yes.
concerned because of the recent bank closure. Are we covered on this?
In
Thing?
In terms of risk.
Yeah, I know we have several different rolling accounts.
Yeah.
How are we covered on?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, especially given recent news. So what I can tell you is I have very strong confidence in the risk profile of this investment. Every time we make a decision to either allow a maturing bond to convert to cash or take the matured bond and reinvest it, every time we do that, we receive a new investment portfolio from what's the name again? Piper Sandler. I keep wanting to say the name of our former accountant, and every time I hesitate because I know that's wrong, but I can't make the mention. Piper Sandler. So we receive an investment portfolio from Piper Sandler that gives us not only all of the investments laid out, but what's the percentage against how many are US Treasury, how many are other municipal and other government bonds, how much is commercial paper. And not only that, but when this board met with Piper Sandler to initiate the whole process, you did an excellent job of working with them to create a very low risk profile. And it established a certain investment plan that said you shall not exceed this balance. So it's a very conservatively balanced portfolio. Right now, I think our guideline to Piper Sandler is 85% of total investments must be US Treasuries. And then the other 15% are either guaranteed municipals or Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the kinds of very stable bond investments. At present, our portfolio is sitting closer to like just above 90% of US T-notes. So those are guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the US government at the rate of return that's listed on the T-note plus the premium and the par. And so every time a note comes to maturity, we're contacted by Piper Sandler, and they offer another option or a set of options with certain yields and certain maturities. And we use the analysis that Greg does of all of the cash flow and budgeting anticipated over time, plus our understanding of what we have in terms of that liquid account of cash in LGIP to decide, okay, now is the time for that matured asset to turn into cash and come out and sit in LGIP. Or no, actually, we have quite a nice reserve in LGIP. We can take that T-note that was at a very low interest rate back 2 years ago when the bond market was terrible because overall interest rates were low. And we can reinvest it now at a much higher yield so that 18 months to 2 years from now, we've converted that note into something that's going to yield the district a high rate of return.
So how are we affected by any possibility of the federal government default?
I would say to you that if the federal government defaults and violates the 13th Amendment to fail to live up to the full faith and credit of the United States not being questioned, we have bigger problems than a library project.
No, I'm thinking about our treasury fund.
Yes, I'm saying to you that if the US government is unable to back US Treasury notes with the full faith and credit of the US government, they're in violation of the 13th Amendment.
Right,
We have bigger problems than a library bond project
yeah, as a nation,
as a nation.
but I'm looking at our cash deposits, right?
Yes,
Treasury defaults, our notes become due at this, in this time period where they're not deciding on what they're gonna do, right?
you mean the bonds that we've issued to investors?
They mature.
Uh,
What happens to our notes?
I could not speculate on such a catastrophic event. I'm sorry.
So we are at risk, definitely.
Risk is a combination of probability and severity.
Mhm.
And while the severity of what you're proposing is high, the probability is quite low.
Hopefully. Okay,
Okay, it's after 1. Any quick last questions before we adjourn and go into the budget meeting?
I'm gonna have to leave at 1:30. I
Okay,
apologize.
all right. Thank you very much, Robert. I'm going to adjourn the regular board meeting and we will reconvene following the budget committee meeting. So adjourn and welcome to the May 2023 Budget Committee meeting. Thank you to all the public budget committee members that we have that have joined us today, new and old. Your service is really appreciated because this is an important part of our year and it's a very important meeting. So Todd, would you like to do the roll call of who is present?
Sure, Betsy Tucker,
Here.
Pat Manny,
Here.
and Erica Scatwell,
Here.
and Dan Quick, here. Tori Gordon is not here. Ann Malcolm,
Here.
Cynthia Claridge,
Here.
Ann Ness is not here. Ray Meow,
Present.
and Bunny Thompson.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, our first order of business is to elect a budget chair. And I would open the floor for nominations.
I'd like to nominate Pat Manning.
Do we have any other nominations? All those in favor of Pat?
Is there a second?
Is there a second?
I'll say.
All right. All those in favor of Pat? All right. Pat.
You didn't reject it.
Are there any public comments? Is that the next? Yeah. All right. Yes, not. I guess Todd, this would be you presenting the budget message.
Okay, just so you know, the budget chair takes care about the drinks afterwards. Okay, I will highlight, I don't usually cover this, but one of the most fun parts about doing the budget is getting the picture for the cover every year. And this was just such a wonderful picture, doesn't show up well on the screen, but I also only get a certain number of words for captions, so I didn't capture much here, but Villa here checked out one of our library to go sewing machines, made her own dress and modeled it for us. And it's just such a nice showing of, you never know what kind of interaction people are gonna have when they walk in our libraries or what kind of impact it's gonna have on them. So I just thought I'd highlight that, especially since our Library of Things is one of our newer services. I will jump right into the budget priorities. And really, as opposed to past years, what you'll see are usually we have a longer list of budget priorities. We have a very significant budget priority, and that is implementing the bond program that the voters passed in November of 2020. And not only is that a significant dollar amount, but it's also a significant time commitment for all of our staff. which doesn't leave a lot of room for a lot of other initiatives. So the number of initiatives you're gonna see here is lower than usual. But this is really, for us, a really exciting point. You see this picture here of the kids in Redmond, grabbing shovels and digging dirt for a groundbreaking. That was a great example of people coming out on a very cold day, about 350 people, because they're so excited about what's coming to their community. And that's what we're doing across the county with all of our building programs. Just to give you an update of where we are right now, we are right in the middle of remodeling the Lapine Library and the Sisters Library. Those will be opening up in September. Then we'll immediately shift into starting to remodel the Sun River Library in early October, and that'll go for about 9 months. Currently, we are underway in Redmond. We have gone vertical. If you go by that property, you will see some structures are up 2 stories, which is really exciting. And so we're actually going to pour the cement floor for the building in the next few weeks, and that's where things really start taking off. So really exciting to get those underway. We are just finishing our design development stage for the Stevens Ranch Library. And so that is very, very much well on its way of being fully designed. Sorry, I got somebody here. The other things that we're looking at, we will be upgrading our East Bend Library, and that'll probably be happening. Kind of depends on some board direction, but we're looking for probably late fall of this year to start work on that. And then the last piece will be the remodel of the downtown Bend Library. And that will be a really exciting piece for us, with being able to move staff out, centralized services staff out to the Stevens Ranch Library. We will be able to open about 25% of that building that's currently used by staff, open up to the public. So big events happening there. This impact is $77 million. You see here reflects the commitments we've made for the next 12 months to complete projects. So that kind of goes in with the cash flow that Greg Holcomb talked about a little earlier. That's what we expect to spend in the next 12 months. Another big initiative that we're doing internally with our staff, it's our equity, diversity, and inclusion work. We have done a lot of work, which I talked about in this document, over the past 2 years. Really realizing that we have a lot of work to do, and this is going to be a kind of a lifelong project for us. And some of the big things we did are starting with coaching and training for all of our management level and supervisor level staff. A couple of months ago, we went through a district-wide, every single staff person working on feedback training, with their goal of really making it a safe place for people to be able to bring up ideas, have those ideas heard, and have feedback going both ways. It's been very nice. Just after initially doing that, that comes up in projects that we're doing. For example, talking about building projects, where we're seeing people are feeling more comfortable about bringing ideas forward, and also really setting a space for us to have those discussions in a safe manner. There's a lot of work that goes into this work. This kind of ties into some of the specific work we'll be doing for coaching and training over the next year. But it actually goes deeper than this, as I said in here. It actually is infused in every department's budget, because each department also has the ability to their education travel budgets to be able to do further education, and we'll be taking advantage of that. This last piece for you veteran budget committee members, I changed the picture every year because we finally have a band. It's out in the parking lot and it's bright white. But this is what it's going to look like in about a month.
Mind advancing the slide on your screen?
Oh, sorry, yes. There it is. This is, as we talked about, supply chain issues have been incredible, because this is the third year it's shown up in the budget. Last year we carried it forward. We're actually buying 3 vehicles. So this will be one of them, and then we have a couple of more to help with our outreach efforts. So now this one is in, we love to set aside some money. They may come in the next 2 months, but if they don't, we wanted to carry that money forward. So that's what you're seeing with that part of the budget, and that will be coming out of our reserve. So those are our major initiatives. Before I kind of get to the nuts and bolts of the budget, I just want to check and see if there are any questions related to those. Yes, sir.
As you're doing the EDI work, what have you learned about the district and how we deliver our services?
That's a great question. We learned that we have a lot more to learn. And the big piece is we've been focusing a lot internally and our staff to be able to start creating a safer place for discussion. And we're just starting to branch out to how can that impact the public. But some of the big things we've already learned, our technical services department with Emily, yes, has done some amazing work, starting with some really basic things like what happens when you go into the library catalog and look for a book? What does that say about your library? And there were a lot of things in there that, well, let's start with the Dewey Decimal System. I'm giving you a longer answer than you want. The Dewey Decimal System is a great example of everything we have set up there. It was created in the 1870s by a gentleman who history has shown us was not the most politically correct person. But just taking religion, for example, religion covers from, I get my numbers right, is it 0
200.
200.
Yeah.
290.
To 290.
There you go, 200 to 290 is Christianity. And then you've got this much left for all the other world's religions. Yes. And that's just kind of an example of, it's something that we have just taken because it's always been there, but we're sending a big message when we say this, here's the world, and then here's the rest of the world. And that happens over and over again with the Dewey Decimal System. So a big change there is we are switching to a new system called Wayfinder, which is actually pretty exciting because it's much more browsable. And think more like when you walk into a bookstore and you're looking for something. The whole how decimal systems work is still hidden behind all of this, but it takes out a big piece. And then also categorizing things is something that we went through and really looked for. Where is there basically inherent racism and categorizations, and how can we change that? And that was really groundbreaking work for this state, where I know Emily's done a lot of presentations around the state, talking with people about how to do this. So those are some really, they seem like behind the scenes thing, but it's one of those things where there's a lot of hidden biases and a lot of the things we do, and these are some examples of where we're from.
So you said in some of the internal training, it's allowing staff to feel like they can give more feedback. How are you assessing if, maybe you're noticing more feedback, but how are you actually assessing if people feel like they can give feedback?
Every 2 years, we do an employee engagement survey, and that's how we track progress over time.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll actually be doing one. I think we just did one, so 2024. We'll do that. Yeah, there are other ways we do it through polls, but that's the most scientific way of actually tracking our progress over time.
Awesome.
Okay. Just some things on the budget process. How this works, basically, our library board is set up under a governance by policy method. And that is they set most of their direction through their results policies. And that's where they set some really high standards of what they would like us to achieve. A good example of that, your results policies are in the last 2 pages of the document, but for example, all residents acquire an appreciation of reading and a desire for knowledge. The board sets that as a priority, and then it's our job as staff to make that happen. And that's where we come back to the board every year and say, here's what we did to achieve that. And it's up to the board to decide if you need to do more or if you achieve what we've asked for. Every year, the board gets together in about November or December and actually ranks the priorities on those. And we use that to help set up this budget. So it's a process that really helps us plan for the future. Kind of once the board sets those priorities, I go and I work with the staff saying, here's what we're trying to accomplish. How can we do it? What are your ideas? We put that together, we develop this budget, and we bring it to all of you for approval. So that's how that piece works. Just some very specific things around the budget committee. Your job today is to review, receive, which you did, and review the budget document. Hear the budget message, which we're doing right now. Hear and consider public comment, which we didn't have any. Request and receive additional information is needed. So if you have any questions or want any more information, please do not hesitate to ask. That's your job. Discuss and revise the budget as needed. And then once we've gone through all that process, we need to approve the budget and approve the property tax rate. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So an interesting part, again, with Oregon, the way Oregon operates. We set the budget right now for how we're going to operate for the next fiscal year, but we don't know how much money we're going to get in taxes until October. So we have to make some educated guesses. And what we do is we start with the previous years, the January 2020 assessed value. I discussed this with the county assessor to get an estimate from him on how much he thinks property taxes will rise over the next year. He estimates about 4.8% this year. So I'm using that estimate to guess at what all of the value of the property in Deschutes County actually is in January of 2023, which already happened, but he doesn't finish doing that until October. So that's where we kind of get that estimate of where our taxes will be. As a district, we are allowed to tax up to a maximum of 55 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And that's a piece that you have control over here because you get to set that rate. You can't go above that, but you could go below it. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. I have based this on that 55 cents piece, and then also factored in that the county doesn't fully collect all taxes, and we're looking at 97% tax rate. So my estimate that I base this budget on is that we will be getting 16.7 million in taxes in this next fiscal year. Some other highlights that I put in here. In this budget, we'll be looking at our personnel costs. They're going up about 4.6% over the previous year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. And then the other piece is just putting in for information. Our PERS rates for this year are at 24% and 21.79%, depending on which tier are staffed. This piece, which you can't see, so here, this is always for me the most integral part of our budget, at least for our general fund, is This chart gives you a great place to look at what we budget last year, what are we actually spending this year, what are we proposing in this budget? And then I project out the following 2 years as well to get a sense of what kind of impact are these decisions going to make in our future years. Obviously, when you go forward into future years, there are many factors that can affect things. And so this is a conservative estimate of what that will look like. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the future when we get to that part. One piece that our library board sets as a policy is that we will not go below 17% of our general fund carry forward. And if we did that, we would be carrying forward at least $3.17 million. We are actually at a much higher level right now. We're way above the 17%. And I'm predicting budgeting at 14.4 million forward. So talking a little bit about that is very high for us to be carrying forward, and it's not something that I recommend, but there's a reason we're at this point. And that is we are getting ready for the new buildings to open, and we will be paying for additional staffing through our general fund. We cannot pay for staffing through bond funds. So a big piece of what we've been doing over the past few years is kind of saving up in our general fund to be able to take on a staffing increase. I will say that this is my last year of being conservative. After this, we'll be getting ready to open the Redmond Library, and I will be needing to expand staffing there. So I expect our staffing costs to go up, starting with the next year's budget. And that will continue as we open Stevens Ranch and we open other facilities. So this is part of us getting ready for that piece.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How many staff members do we have presently?
We have about 100 staff people. The actual number is on your page. Let's see. Oh, here. Page 24. We have 101.4 FTE. Yeah. And so I expect that will be going up, especially once we open the Stevens Ranch Library. Because we're gonna need more staff for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question. So
Yeah.
is our current tax rate enough to cover those ongoing costs? Obviously, we're saving the money to take that one-time hit of all those coming on at once, but.
Yeah, and what you're kind of getting at is, as you add those staff, that money is going to go down exponentially over the years. So a big piece of that is, yes, we planned in that we'll be able to cover that. But also as we do with everything, as we go through time, we are going to have to watch that and adjust how we spend. So without kind of going too far out in the future, we just did an exercise with our board looking out about 10 years, and we feel very confident that we're in good shape for being able to operate those buildings. That is a big piece of what we did before we went out for the bond. We did not want to go out for the bond and ask for funds to build buildings that would sit empty because we couldn't afford to run them, or have to come back to the taxpayers and ask for an increase in funds. I will say that we have this 55 cents is one of the lower rates in government in this area. And that's one that we have managed to be very conservative to stay under that amount. And our challenge as time goes on will be to stick with that, especially if we have been able to increase our staffing based on growth in revenue, based on taxes going up because of growth in the community. At some point, as that levels out, that will be a challenge for us because our staffing costs do continue to go up with cost of living increases and staff increases. Okay. And that's where some of the things you'll see in the 2-year projections are, I did base that on, we do average about 5% a year in growth and taxes, so I included that in here. And then was conservative in looking at about 6% growth in staffing and other costs such as materials and services each year. As it looks right now, we're in pretty strong shape looking forward into future years. I will highlight that we recently ran an analysis of all the budgets I've done since 2009. And I just very much run conservative. So when I show you what that projection is going to be in 2 years, it's always lower than what it actually has been. I usually try to look for the worst case scenario of what that would look like. I tried to adjust that more this year, so it's not quite as conservative. Because if you get too conservative, it paralyzes you. You won't want to spend anything because it's going to look like things are going bad. But we're in really strong shape going forward. This is going to be a big year for us right now. We have the Redmond library is in a temp space, La Pines in a temp space, and Sisters in a temp space. We'll be moving into full-fledged libraries in all 3 locations coming up after this budget year. Any questions on this piece?
I'm just curious about the staff numbers. How many new people are you thinking? It almost sounds like you'll need more people everywhere because the libraries are getting bigger, so.
Yeah, in Redmond, Lynn, help me out. I mean, we're probably looking at a few more positions coming in there.
Yeah, Sisters and La Pine will increase that need there. Just ever so slightly, they are getting some RFID technology improvements that they did previously have, which will help a little bit with staff efficiency. Redmond is also getting an automated handling unit, so that is also going to introduce some efficiencies to the Redmond library. It's going to be a 7-bin unit, so what that means is you don't need to have staff actually checking materials in constantly nonstop. They just, there's a machine that will do a form, that will do the sorting, that will get it prepped for courier, it can go right out the door. And that takes up an inordinate amount of staff time. So the answer to your question is a little more complicated than not pure numbers, but we do expect to at least double what they currently have in their temp space, and then look at that AMH and see how that impacts staffing and move from there. This is our first, the library, the District Library's first kind of foray into using automated handling. We're really excited about it and are really looking forward to the efficiency.
Is that here now or?
It is not. It is not at any of our locations.
So the
Downtown Bend is too small for us to put on it efficiently. So, yeah, we haven't had that. We were able to do it within.
And the big jump will be when Stevens Ranch opens. That right now is slated for 2026, January. And that would be about 17 additional people, which is a big jump from to go to 100 to 170.
I had a question on, and I came in just at the end of the financial review. Are we receiving interest off of the bond funding, or?
We are.
Yeah, is that restricted in any way?
And that is restricted to the capital projects, yes.
And actually that, if you will see interest, you see jumped from 60,000 to 364. That is just based on interest rates having gone up over the last year. And that's just in our general fund, not related to the bonds. The bonds will be tapped out. There is about a 5-year window where at that point, if you haven't completed 80% of your projects, the IRS can start taking that interest money. So we don't get to keep using it forever. Okay. So we have 5, is it 5 funds now?
Yes. Well, yeah, you group all the grant funds into like one.
Yeah, we have a general fund, that's where we do most of our operating. That's a lot of what the previous chart we looked at was based on. But the other funds we have a reserve fund, which we'll take a look at. Right now, we're not doing a lot of work with the reserve fund because we're so heavy in the bond project. Then we have grant funds, and we'll take a look at that. And then new for the last couple of years are the bond funds and then the debt service fund. Each of those are separate, and we'll take a look at the very end as to how all those add up together. What you see in the following pages and that all have the blue in it is our general fund, and we've broken that down by different departments across our library district. This is the page that totals them all up. But you'll see our business services department, or human resources, community relations, each of those have their own budgets, which we'll have a chance to take a look at. And I can come back to this page after we look at the departments, if that is more helpful. So to just give you a general sense of the first department we have is our system supports or administration. It's really a fund I use for basically our district-wide services, such as getting our legal services, our educational and travel, that is for me and for the library board members. We do send library board members to conferences and training. So that's what that is. You'll notice there's nothing under election expense. We only run elections on odd years. We will not be running one next fiscal year. But I leave that in there because I feel if I take it out, I'm gonna forget it. So that's why it is there this year. And then the contractual piece, that's consulting and facilitating. A facilitator we use to work with the board. The board has about 3 or 4 work sessions a year. And then also facilitation and coaching that I'm doing with my staff as well. Let's see. Any questions on this? Business services, this is our facilities and our finance services. And Robert Henry is our manager of that department. So this covers basically our operating of the district, taking care of the buildings, paying the rent for the East Bend Library, insurance. Really anything you can think about for running the services, also for financial services, banking fees and audits as well, coming out of this area.
Todd, I assume that the $5,700 amount under rent is for the. Well, I shouldn't assume that. What is that?
That's your, you just earned a candy bar, I think.
That is rent and lease of other items, I think.
Oh, it is.
So it was in addition to East Bend Library, we also pay small amounts for things like the PO box at LaPine or the
Okay.
storage unit
Okay.
for external.
Oh,
storage.
Yeah.
actually, no, yeah, that is correct. As I was
Yeah.
I was reading as non-employee labor. Yes, so that's exactly what he said.
Okay.
It is correct.
All right.
Yeah, you don't get this camera.
And the portion under East Bend Library, that's rent.
Yeah.
That is also rent, yeah, but that is specific to the location of East Bend Library.
I will highlight that, as director, my spending authority, anything over $150,000 needs express approval by the board. So I called out anything above that amount, I pulled those out. So rather than just leaving at least for 189, I pulled out East Bend because it's a significant dollar. So you may see that in other areas. For example, under buildings and grounds, our janitorial is a significant amount. And so we're made sure that we were calling that out, so they can see that, and then just get folded into a big category. Okay. Our human resources department, that's, as you see, it covers all of our personnel, recruitment, new employee orientation, benefits. This is one that I highlighted in the budget message where a lot of our EDI work is coming out of with the coaching, consulting, and facilitating out of this department. That's probably the biggest highlight that I have in here, education and travel. That it's not just education and travel for that department, but that also covers our, we attempt to have an annual staff day. We haven't had one in 5 years for reasons we're all aware of. So that's coming back this year, and that will be in the budget. So that's part of that budget as well. Our community relations department, that really is, it's public relations. It's also our branding and marketing. It's all of our programming for adults. Actually, as of this year, it's adults and kids. And also all the printing we do for signage as well as event guides, that all come out of this department. One board priority that was a high one for the board, has been for the last couple of years, is that residents understand the types and scopes of services that the library provides. And so that's a big emphasis for us with our advertising and marketing. And that's really important to us, especially in a community where we get about 6,000 new residents in Deschutes County a year. Making sure that we're connecting with them and letting them know about the resources that we have. And that's really important, especially if they come from a community that did not have strong library services. We really have to do an education to let them know that things are different here, that we do have services for. Okay, information technology. This is a huge piece of what we do. Basically, everything that we do in the library, it requires a very strong network. And kind of new over the last few years is the cloud and subscription services, especially a lot of the software that we have used in the past that's shifted more to subscription type services. So if you're comparing the past budgets, you'll see where that's kind of growing and the other is going down. Most again is not really looking for any big initiatives here. It's really just the maintenance of our current systems, especially when you get the capital supplies, making sure that we're replacing computers and servers on a regular basis so that they're in good shape.
And that capital outlay, the 500,000, that's not for new facilities and all that, it's just maintaining and.
Exactly.
Yeah, computers and other IT equipment typically fall into that capital asset category, and so we track it as a capital outlay as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is up substantially from the previous year. I mean, last year it was, I believe, 431,000 in the contractual part. So that's a, so it's just cost increases and transition to cloud-based platforms.
It's a big piece that kind of runs throughout the budget. Also, don't forget the inflation that we've seen over the last
Right.
couple of years is really starting to impact things. But this also reflects in the contractual, some of that shift more towards the subscription services as well.
Okay. I just wondered whether there was anything new and big planned or, big replacement of items.
Yeah,
What is the unanticipated materials and services?
that
What do you use that for?
Uh,
To transfer to other places in the budget, or?
that is really just exactly as it says, not sure if we transfer Evan's budget, it would be within IT. Just never knowing where your disaster is gonna strike. Whether it's a server that goes out, and we didn't budget for it, or some other equipment. And this is one of the few places where you'll actually see an unanticipated within a department budget, and that is, when something happens in IT, we need to take care of it right away. So that's what we're looking at there.
If you don't use it, does it go back into the general fund or?
That, yes, and that is true of all the line items in our general fund. If we don't use it, it goes back in the general fund. That is one where I think we have created a very healthy culture here. I have worked in places where you spend every dime you get. Yeah, you don't get it, or, and here we are really focused on, let's make sure we budget for what we need. And knowing that we will cover it in future budgets when we get to it. And so that is one that I will definitely say of any of our budgets. Mark Hubby runs the tightest ship. When he tells you that he's going to spend $574,850 in contractual, he'll probably be within about $1,000 of that every
Well, I
year.
appreciate that, Todd. Thank you.
And speaking of which, that kind of came up in the budget piece, but that's a big piece of, when we're rolling money over the previous years, a lot of that from underspending. That has been in the last couple of years, mainly because of between supply chain issues and shutting down services. When we look back a few years, we definitely underspent in those years. And that just moved forward. Okay, library services. This is basically, this is where everybody that is providing direct resources, doing outreach services, really thinking about our librarians. That is where this department is. And a lot of the work they're doing right now is shifted to direct services out in the community. They'll be taking advantages of those mobile vehicles that we're talking about. So you expect to see a lot more of them coming forward. Let's see, operations. This is, think of anybody you walk into when you walk into a library that's serving. All our direct customer service comes through operations. They're doing our circulation of library materials, helping people at the information desk. That's what this department is looking at. This makes up probably the largest portion of our staffing budget, our staffing numbers across the district. Okay, technical services. This is where the magic happens. This is where all of our books come in, all of our ordering, all of our cataloging. And this, you'll see when we talk about inflation, this is one that is definitely starting to impact us. That's the book costs have definitely gone up over the last year. So that's factoring in there. There's a couple of factors in there. One, the books costs are going up and we have more people in our communities. One of the biggest things that has held back our book budget over the last few years is the amount of space we have to actually put the books in. So these new buildings coming up, not yet reflected in these budgets. But this budget will definitely be going up as we open those new buildings. We can use part of the bond funds to actually start opening day collections in those buildings. But as we maintain them over the years, we will definitely be seeing increases in this budget. We talked a little bit about that reclassification project going from Dewey Decimal to wayfinding. And that's part of the cost we're looking at here as we finish up that project, going into the next year. If, shelf ready cost, just pointing out what that is, that is, we actually work with vendors that when we order books and they deliver them to them, they come fully ready to go on the shelf. They've got labels on them, they've got RFID tags, which has been a huge staff savings for us to not have to, before we get a book that you can pick up at a bookstore and we'd have to wrap it, label it, put stickers all over it. So that's kind of a newer change over the last few years. When you see software for technical services, think of all of our the online services that we have for the public. That's where those are taken. And e-services, that's where we run all of our web services, online support. They also do a lot of the programming for us as well. And see if there's anything to highlight in here. If you're looking at past budgets, it's very similar to previous ones. There are not a lot of changes in this one. And then public services oversees all the library operations and library services. And so a lot of this is support to the staff that are doing that. So the education and travel and meeting support are big pieces. That one. And then we kind of separate from departments. We have a summer with a library program. It's a significant enough program that we felt like we should highlight it in the budget. That's where we put a lot of effort. It's for all ages. And it's a really big initiative for our staff. It's in the buildings. Think of the traditional summer reading program type thing that the kids do, but we do it for all ages, which is really fun. Really stretching that to adults, trying to encourage them to read throughout the summer as well. One of the things that is really exciting about this is we do a lot of outreach in the community for the summer with the library. For example, going to low-income apartment complexes, setting up shop and having resources for people, talking about the library. One of the really neat things that our staff has done is they started doing this a few years and other agencies joined in with us. So now when we show up at an apartment complex, we may have multiple agencies out there with us, like Parks and Rec, Food to Table. I'm sure you could list about 10 more that I can't think of. Yeah, so it's really exciting that it's not just something that, hey, this is what we're doing as a library and we don't care what anybody else is doing. We're doing something where we're really bringing an entire community of people. So that, I'm going to go back to all of that ties into our general fund costs, our materials and services and capital outlay, as you see here. And I'm just checking to see if you have any questions on that as a total. That's page 9 that I just looked back to.
So can you remind me what the cutoff for capital outlay is as far as like for IT, years of service? Like things that last longer than X number of years.
Yeah, what differentiates it from materials and services?
Right.
To just speak generally on it, usually we'll apply 2 standards. One is the dollar value. In certain cases, like for computers, instead of it being, 1 piece per, it might be in the aggregate, but still, it rises above a certain dollar value and it has a certain durability to it as well, so that we want to track it and actually depreciate it on our accounts as
Right.
well over time. And so the majority of our fixed assets really are the buildings and the equipment that goes in the buildings. But the IT is probably our second biggest area where you see capital assets being documented in our fixed asset register. And it is because of that aggregation. So you start to look at the replacement cost, for example, of if we had something catastrophic go in one of our server rooms, that server room represents an aggregate that would be significant, and it you know, it ages over time, but it's over a period of years that we track that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the 300,000 in contingency doesn't show up in here because it's not materials and services from capital outlay. In previous years, does that contingency end up getting used, or is that something that?
Yeah, so we have been a library district since 1999, and we have tapped into the contingency once. That was in 2007, when we built the Sisters Library, we spent $60,000. So the answer is no, we do not traditionally use it. Really, it's there for real emergencies. But we've been through some pretty big emergency years over the past few years and have not had to tap into it. Yeah. Okay. So the reserve fund, usually this is kind of, I always think of it as your savings account. Really, we save this for future capital projects, services. And this is one that we don't have a lot of activity here because we're doing so much work with the capital projects, the bond projects. So really the only expense that we're looking at here is the carryover of the mobile library services. And other than that, we're not really touching our reserve fund. This is one that we'll probably, as we finish our bond projects and get through a couple of years of the buildings, then we'll probably be looking at using this again in the future. But for the next few years, this will be somewhat dormant as we're doing those projects. Grant funds. This represents all the grants that we know about at this point. So if we get any grants after the budget process, that will go through board approval. But right now, these are all the ones we know about. We're not aware of any that are pending at this point. Ready to Read is actually in the state of Oregon is a really exciting grant to have. The Oregon legislature basically says every library gets, they try to aim for $1 per kid in each community. I'm not sure the exact number they're at right now, but it's something that's basically every library can get without having to do an extensive process to apply for it. And so our income is based on the number of kids in Deschutes County. And the reason you see 2 of these is they run on a calendar year and we run on a fiscal year. So the 2023 one, we're continuing to spend right now. And then we will start up spending the 2024 one as those funds come in December. So this we use this as Ready Read is for children, I think up to the age of 14. They might have changed that. I don't remember. Okay.
I think they tried to add teens recently and it did not go forward. So
Yeah, we use this a lot for our outreach services to children and our early literacy initiatives as well. So that's a really nice grant for us to have. That Novel Idea is, if you're all aware of the Novel Idea Community Read program that we have, the funding from that comes from the Deschutes Public Library Foundation, where they go out and they get donors and sponsors, and then they donate that money to us for our staff to use that to get the authors, set up all the programs, buy books. So that's what the novel idea budget is and where it's coming from. We do get funds from the Deschutes Public Library Foundation for collection development. That's when people write them a check, say, I want this money to go towards buying books. And the same for initiatives for children, youth initiatives. Right now, the foundation is actively looking for support for to help enhance the building projects. But for the collection development and youth initiatives, they're always getting donations, and this is kind of where they come in. And then a really interesting one, the NIH walking grant. I mentioned that here, but the National Institute of Health, along with the Oregon Health Sciences University School of Nursing, is working with the Deschutes Public Library, where they're helping to fund this, and where our staff is going out recruiting people to actually go out and walk. And then the OHSU is doing programs to kind of help see what kind of benefits that's bringing to people. So it's kind of a unique program. We haven't had something like this before. We just started kicking that off, and I don't remember how many walkers we had at the first one. Remember the numbers?
We recruited 22.
Okay.
And just a note on what you've written here, we'll probably have some carryover into the next fiscal year, just by nature of the timing of the program, sitting on those calendar year break versus fiscal year break.
So those are all of the grants which we're aware of for this budget. Getting into the bond capital fund. We project that starting with fiscal year, we will have about $200 million in funds. We sold the bonds in May of 2021. And we have done some spending with the projects over the last year and a half. Next year is going to be a big year for expenditures because we're doing a lot of work. Construction to full bore in Redmond. And also with LaPine and Sisters, we expect to spend about $62.5 million for the capital portion of that, and $14.5 million for the materials and services. And all of that lays out with our cash flow models for completing those projects. This is just what we'll be spending in the fiscal year.
Does that materials and services, is that design as well as furniture and fixtures, or is that?
The design fees are capitalized, so they're part of the capital outlay, but most of the other fees show up in materials and services, things like system development costs, permit fees, and then other things associated with the move of materials into temporary spaces and out, and the rent of those places.
Yeah. The debt service fund is probably one of the most straightforward. We have known amounts. We have the principal payment, which we do on June 1st of 24, and then the 2 interest payments. We know the exact amounts of those. And then basically the county assessor assesses people on their tax to pay for that. That's where that money comes from. And then we make those payments. So when you see library bond on your tax statements, this is what it's going to pay. It's going to pay the debt service on the bonds that we sold in 2021. Okay. Just at the end, these are the state forms. Will highlight that this form, the LB20, we sent you an updated model. Thank you, Dan, because you got somehow I made up a number For the adopted budget 22-23 for taxes balance, I have no idea where that number came from. And again, this just kind of brings back in, this is another way of looking at the general funds that we looked at as far earlier. Kind of the one difference on the LV 31 on page 24 is this is where you actually see a breakdown of all of our staffing by type of position, the number of people in each position, and the salary costs related to that. As far as the benefits in the bottom, that showed up in your 3-year projection earlier. Any questions on this page?
So we're actually down in FTE slightly from the previous years, and am I correct in remembering that we consolidated some part-time people into full-time people?
We did some of that. What it's actually reflecting is the fact that while Redmond and the High and Sisters are in temporary phases, we're not fully staffed. And then we had some turnover and we didn't fill those positions, and we're not going to until we get the buildings done. So yeah, it is down from, especially last year. But that's a temporary situation.
Right. And it's just, yeah. Makes sense.
Again, this is just re-encapsulating all of the materials and services that we looked at before. Oh, I should go back on anything in the budget where it's a category we used in the past. I have to keep it in here until we get about 3 years out. So if you see, for example, 13N on the staffing, that will be showing there for a couple more years until we run through the second preceding and first preceding year. Again, you're seeing the capital outlay. There's that $300,000 contingency that we just talked about. Grant funds, again, this is just laid out in the state form for you. And then the reserve resource and requirements LD 11. This is the capital fund. With $200,000 for the mobile vehicle. And the bond capital fund, again, that's just, again, looking at another page. And the bond debt fund. And then LB1 is a form that we actually publish after the budget's approved. But I put this in here because it's the only way to actually see how much are we actually spending. Because we have 5 different categories. How can we see those all together? And then highlight that we did some corrections on the actual amounts from 21-22 and the adopted budget 22-23 from what was in your packet. And so anyway, that shows that this, our total budget is $249 million. It's not something you get too used to in a library. That is definitely related to the bond projects, but that's where we are right now. And the last piece, which I talked about, was just the full board result policies. And that is your budget. Any general questions on that?
Can I ask you, what are temporary investments? Look back on 29. There's $1 million from earnings from temporary investments.
That is, that's basically, that should be our interest, is that?
Yeah, I believe that's the interest on the The bond money that's invested in, treasury notes, et cetera.
Oh, okay.
So going back to, what I talked about early is, one, we are required to come out of this with two things. One, to pass the budget and approve the budget. And I give you sample motions, and the second one is to approve the tax rate. So this is, you have the ability to tax up to 55 cents per $1,000 assessed value, which this budget is based on. You also have the ability to lower that if you feel that's necessary. And I won't beg too much to keep it at 55. But those are the two required things that we need to have come out of this.
Yeah, okay.
Am I supposed to read it or do I have to?
Yeah, I think you can ask if people want it, but if anybody has any additional questions too.
Are there any additional questions?
No, I move that the budget committee of the Deschutes County Public Library District approves the budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year as presented.
There was a second?
Second.
Oh, no,
We didn't ask for questions.
Oh.
We got your questions.
So, yeah,
You're doing great.
you're just fine, it's all good.
Okay, questions or comments?
And then you just get the county. All those in favor.
Well, we just want to make sure the other wording, Deschutes Public Library District, I think we heard county.
Did I say that? Oh, Deschutes Public Library District.
There you go.
Just in case they hold me to it.
Yes.
Did again? I could scratch that motion. Okay, I'll do it. I move that the budget committee of the Deschutes Public Library District approves the budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year as presented.
Still seconded.
Okay. Said it right the first time. Did I really say it wrong? It's Deschutes County Public Library District, but it's confusing. It's like a circle. So you a slip up.
Yes.
I'm surprised, I thought you would have given it to the community college.
There we go.
Just slip it in and then.
Yeah, like,
Is that how that works?
Okay, now we vote.
Yeah.
All in favor, please raise your hands.
Okay.
I guess all in favor of the budget. Okay, then,
Should ask for any opposed.
oh, any opposed?
Okay.
All right. And then we're going to move to approve the taxes.
I move that the budget committee of the Deschutes Public Library District approves proposed tax levy for the 23-24 fiscal year at the rate of 55 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation.
A second. I'll second it. Okay, any questions? Comments? Okay, could I ask for a vote, please? Anybody, if you approve? Raise your hands. Any, anybody not in favor? Okay. All right.
Is that it?
That's it?
That's it.
Oh, wait, yes. Yes, we did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you just close the budget meeting. All right.
Yeah.
The budget meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Definitely put in the hot seat, right? No, thank you, everybody, for your thorough review. Dan, you get the Rookie of the Year award for spotting the discrepancy. We really appreciate your service, because this takes a lot to go through this in detail, and your thoroughness is really appreciated, and your service is appreciated. Thank you very much. We have a budget.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll call the regular board meeting back into session. For a brief update, library news, Todd.
Highlighting, we just had the El Dia de los Niños, El Dia de los Libros at Hugh Hartman Elementary School in Redmond. Over 350 people came. In a bilingual setting to eat, dance, learn, and connect with their community. Just really exciting event, a great turnout. Let's see. Oh, also good news. We have more land now, or we're about to. In Redmond, there's a little park between the library and the police department. Kind of the walkway area.
It looks like it's considered a park.
Well, sort of. The city council last night voted to turn that over to us. So we'll be, which is nice because I know they're looking to sell the police department and we're worried about what would happen with that. So it'll be a nice addition for that library. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's my news.
Okay, well, for foundation news. Novel Idea just wrapped up and it was spectacular this year. It's the 20th anniversary celebration, which kind of rolled author into Novel Idea. We brought back 4 authors. And it was just a fantastic evening.
Was that
Good.
filmed at all?
It was filmed.
I can go back.
I don't think that's on YouTube yet, but it'll be.
It will.
Oh,
Yeah.
Can you? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just, I mean, people laughed, people cried, the authors laughed, the authors cried. I mean, and Aaron Schweitzer from The Source did a great job as moderator, and it was just wonderful. And people's responses as they came through and got books signed was just really heartwarming. And I mean, from all the events, the staff just did a great job in coordinating and pulling together a lot of different kinds of events. So people had access to the authors, from writing workshops to seminars to, special events honoring donors and the authors. I mean, it just was really, it was very lovely. And one of the really big highlights was the 20th anniversary exhibit at the Deschutes Historical Museum, who are just amazing partners. So we had a breakfast there with the authors, and then we took them upstairs and they got to see the exhibit, which included quilts and the 2020 quilts that were made for Anne Griffin's visit. No one had ever seen because of the pandemic. And she started crying. And Peter Heller was trying to buy the one quilt that wasn't for sale the last time around. I mean, he was like, I need this quilt. I mean, and just all the memorabilia that the staff pulled together for that exhibit was just really great. And I think how long is it still up for?
I think until June. Yeah.
Okay, and you can get in free with your library card. So if you haven't had a chance to go over there, it's just kitty corner.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's really cool. And they thought it was cool too. So, yeah, it was just a great year. Yes. Every year I say, this was the best year ever. It may have been, I don't know. So, is there any critical communication that needs to happen from this meeting?
I think just the posting of the approved budget, which will be out probably sometime tomorrow.
Okay. Self-review of the meeting. Cynthia, you want to start?
If I say something that I shouldn't be saying at this meeting, just stop me, okay? I wanted to, because I might go a little bit into political. So stop me if I say something wrong. I wanted to really want you to know how much I appreciate all the factual information you give us, because I was able to use so much of that at times to stand up to say, no, that's not accurate. This is what's accurate, actually happening, because one of the things that's being said is that the central library is gonna cost so much money that all the other libraries, none of them will be funded. And so I've been able to actually share the information you provide with us on a monthly basis to say, no, this is not actual. This is what's actually happening. So I do appreciate your monthly reports. Hallelujah, we have a budget. I'm happy about that.
Better than US.
Yeah. All right, Bunny.
I just want to say thank you to the people who presented earlier, their comments. I appreciated they were very targeted. Nobody tried to glaze over what was actually on their mind.
Mhm.
And I thought it was great and very brave, very, very brave. So thank you. And we have a budget.
Yes, we do have a budget. Yeah, I would like to echo what both of you just said. The clarity with which the information on the bond is presented and available has been so helpful in counteracting claims of misinformation, informing the media about the correct information. It's just, it's presented in a way that is really accessible for the average person to understand what's going on, and I think that that's super helpful. So I too have used the bond information to really to educate people and to sort out confusion and apprehension and fear that's been created because incorrect information has been presented. I too want to express my appreciation for the public comments in today's meeting. I do think that takes a lot of courage. And I believe that it shows that how committed people are to the success of our library system. We're really lucky that people care so much that they're willing to come forward. So thank you very much.
If I may,
Yes.
I also want to highlight the budget is a product of a lot of people's work. It takes about 3 months to do. Really, each department really digging into proposals, talking with their staff. And then I really want to highlight, unlike in the past, because Robert's position was kind of a new position, he's an incredible resource to help us get this budget done. So it's so nice to have somebody that's suffering along with me. I really put him to the test today. So just when you see that, know how much effort went into making sure these happen. And I just get to be the pretty face that explains it, but there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah. Well, no, we really appreciate it, and it's like, it's clear, it's complete, it's wonderful, so thank you very much to everybody involved. Okay, with that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.
Okay. And